Hi there, clay folks. I'm here in my lovely garage where I keep my home kiln, and I'm getting ready to unload. I fired a bisque firing, which means that my stuff that I made before the quarter started had dried out completely, and now it has been fired. So now it's no longer clay. So clay is the wet stuff we work with. Clay is technically what our slip is. It's just really wet clay. Clay is what it is when it's leather hard and we can carve into it. And clay is still what it is when it's bone dry. At that point, what I usually do is I put that stuff into my kiln here and I fire it. In fact, I have a load of stuff that I fired the other day. Now that this stuff has been fired once, we call it bisque. It has been bisque fired or biscuit fired, depending where you are in the world of what you call it. This bisque firing means that this clay, is a lot stronger. It's no longer porous. It's no longer going to absorb water. It's no longer going to slake. It'll still absorb water. So if I dribble a little bit of water in here or pour myself some coffee in here, it's going to soak into the pot. Don't pour your coffee in your bisqueware. It's going to soak into and eventually through the pot. So at this point, what I normally do is I glaze the work again and fire it. Now you all have a couple of options this quarter. You can bring your work in and I can load it into my kiln. Well, not my kiln, I'll load it into the school kiln and we'll fire your stuff. Now we can do that with your work that has been you made it, it's dry, now it's ready to go in the kiln. Then you can take it home and we can glaze fire it. You can glaze it at home and then we can glaze fire it. That'll be two separate firings to get your work done. Now, that means you've got to come to campus 2 times. And I don't know how feasible that is for everybody. In fact, I'm going to ask you in a moment for you to give me some feedback on that, because I understand that coming in 2 times may be a challenge. If you have work that is pretty stable, so a mug like this, it's got a handle, the attachment is really strong, it doesn't have any cracks, maybe it has some decoration on the front. These are my 2020 mugs, lots of screaming. That work can handle coming in, getting bisqued, and then glaze it later. But this stuff can also, if we're careful, handle what's called a once fire. So a once fire is where we take the work and when it is bisque fired, when it is leather hard or bone dry, we put our glaze on. Now you have to be careful. This one has a glaze on and it's just come out of my bisque, my first firing. But this glaze, and this is a glaze, it's, this is an underglaze. It's a type of colored slip. But you can put your glaze straight on the pot and fire it once. The problem is it makes it more fragile. So if you do have a handle or little bits coming off, the join, the place where they're attached, this is my COVID mug, the place where they're attached is going to be a weak point. So if you add glaze, which has water in it, you're going to be adding a little bit of water that's going to tend to make it a little bit more fragile. So that is a risk. So the safest way for us to do it, well, the safest way is that we walk from the house to the garage and put it in the kiln. But the safest way for us to do it in this online class is that you bring in your work for a bisque firing or a biscuit firing, that first firing. You bring it home and it's stronger. Now I want to be real careful with these because they do stick out a bunch. This would be a difficult piece to travel with. Like, this would not be my recommended form to travel to the YVC studio with, because all these little bits can break off. In fact, I might have one here to show you. Yes, I do. This is a piece that I made this summer, and it's got these little pieces coming off, and that little bit that sticks out by itself, that is much more likely to crack during a firing and cause you trouble. My recommendation is you get all your decoration either very well attached, like a handle, scored and slipped and secured on there, or you make sure that it's stuck down to the surface of the pot, pressed, carved, or scored and slipped in place. But regardless, if you come in and do a bisque firing with me, that's 2 trips into the studio. I want to know if you think that you're going to be able to come in and do a bisque, or you would rather try to do a once firing. If you're doing a once firing, and we can split it up, some people can do each. If you're doing a once firing, I'm going to talk to you real carefully about safety with these pieces. And the first thing I want to mention to you, safety-wise, I can mention right away. Those handles that you might be attaching, or any decoration that you might be attaching even in the first project, these are the weakest point before it's been fired. So you are going to have to be real careful don't pick it up by the handle until it's been bisque fired. If it hasn't been bisque fired yet, don't pick it up by the handle. But then even then you want to be careful not to knock into it, right? And not to add moisture after it's gotten bone dry, okay? So that's an option. Some people ask me about firing in your oven at home. This kiln for my bisque firing, it gets to about 1800 degrees, maybe 1750 would be okay. 1730 would get us where we need to be. Your oven does not get that hot. Your campfire does not get that hot. You are not going to be able to build a kiln without some significant construction to get to the temperatures that we're talking about here. All right. Other thing I want to mention to you is when you bring your stuff in for me to fire, some of it may look similar, like a number of people are making teacups. How do I know this is mine? Well, obviously the face is a bit of a giveaway, but if you look right here, you can see that that's my signature stamp. Signature stamps usually go in the bottom or the bottom. Not inside here, because once you put a glaze in it, we're not going to see it, right? But along the bottom or on the very bottom surface. When you put that stamp in, or you don't have a stamp, so if you, or unless you made one out of Sculpey, you can carve it in. Don't use a needle tool. Use a rubber tip tool or wooden tool, or a pen or a dull pencil is great because it's going to make you a nicer line. And I'll show you that again in the studio.